This is the start of the Giles Track from the Kathleen Springs end, and at the moment I'm around about 100 metres into the walk, and it's nice and early morning. It's about 25 past 7, and you can see we've already got beautiful views looking out. Actually, this is actually down onto the walk and the flood plains on the way into Kathleen Springs. I'm up on the George Gill Range looking out in a southerly direction. And how is this for a view of the dunes and swales out in sand country? If you look at this, it's right in the middle now. You can see the dune, the high systems fooling the dunes. I can zoom in on it. And then you can see the low systems in the middle. So if you check out this shot here, on each side of the screen you've got your dune, and in the middle of that you've got your swales, the lower areas. And very different vegetation can grow on these as well. So you'll get certain plants that only grow, or tend to only grow on the top of the dunes, and then you'll get some plants that tend to only grow in those swale systems in the middle. Look at this sand country. Just dune after dune after dune. Absolutely magnificent. Now, George Gill Range is actually the heart of Watarrka National Park, and where I am at the moment, this walk that I'm on, the Giles Track, is actually traversing the top of this range. So it's a bit tricky to see at the moment, but in the back over here in front of me is the rest of the range, and I'm actually up on top of it. It's a really prominent feature in Watarrka National Park. It actually runs all the way from the northeast to the southwest corner of the park. It takes up a fairly substantial proportion of it. So we've got three main habitat systems in Watarrka National Park. You've got this range country, which a lot of this is looking at today. You've got your sand country, which we were just looking out over before, and you can see again now. And you've got your valley country, which is that strip between sand country and the range that gets all this these really huge amounts of water from the runoff and drainage line systems of the range. They're all got very unique habitats, often unique flora and fauna, and because of this, the differences, they can have different soil composition, and they've got different water contents as well, and the amount of rain and water in the soil is very different. So here you have what I was mentioning just a moment ago. The Giles Track runs along the George Gill Range, and here, this is a great place to view. I'm on the top of the range at the moment, but you can see it's a really wide range, and it's a big one, and it's a really prominent feature in the Watarrka landscape. And these are the sort of spectacular views you get along this 22 kilometre Giles Track. Looking out here over range country, this particular area, you've got a nice big dense patch of spinifex. Now range country is a really tough, harsh place to live. It's exposed to the elements, it has fairly low nutrient soil, and it doesn't get the huge rainfalls that, obviously there's no huge rainfalls in the area, but when it rains you might get your isolated little patches here. It gets what falls on it. Not like the areas down in valley country which collects all the runoff from this range. So you're looking at a place that's very tricky to live. It's a harsh, hard environment to live, and yet this spinifex thrives here. It's got several adaptations to help it cope with this harsh environment. It's got its leaves they're rolled up to form almost a needle-like thing. And what this does is it helps them to retain water, and helps them to stop losing water in this really harsh environment. It's also a good defense mechanism. These ones here, these ones in particular, are a soft spinifex, but you do get hard spinifexes. They're sharp, they're pointy, and it makes them less palatable to a lot of species than what they would be otherwise. Now you can see through here there's actually two different kind of spinifex. The one closest to us here in the foreground, it's one of the soft spinifex and from the Triodia species. This one in the background, you can actually see it looks almost like a golden line, and it's actually, or it looks like feathers, and that's actually its common name. It's called feather top spinifex, and it's actually one of the harder or the pointier spinifex. Its name's Triodia shinzai. Now, these Triodia species and the spinifex species that live in this area are actually a contributing factor to the reason why there's such a high reptile diversity in the area. This area, south of Alice Springs in Central Australia, has one of the highest reptile diversities in the world, which is pretty incredible when you think about it. And this spinifex is a really integral part of this, providing shelter and shade. You can imagine, because reptiles can't regulate their own temperature, they rely on the environment around them to heat and cool. These plants that provide that shade in summer are a really necessity to survival. There's also species of termites that live in these spinifex plants and actually eat them, so that in itself provides a food source for the reptiles as well. As well as protection, obviously, from prey from above as well.
So this is actually one of the dry creek beds that you come across along the walk. You can see the species have changed from what you had back there on the range, and there's actually slightly bigger shrubs and trees.
Look at this beautiful old tree. I cannot get any more nerdy and excited about trees like this. Check out this hollow. Hollow is an absolutely integral place for many Australian native animals. They're a really important part of habitat. And it's actually, they use it when they're measuring the often the habitat value of areas. Hollows are included in that assessment, and it's just often not taken into consideration in Australia. When there's forests cut down for timber industries or for development or things like that, it's all very well and good to say for every one tree we're cutting down we're replacing with 3, or whatever the excuse is this time. But unfortunately they don't actually take really important habitat values like hollows into account when they do a lot of these calculations. In Australia, it can take between 80 and 150 years for trees to start developing hollows. One of the really special things about these trees, these river red gums, is you can check it out. You can see there the pointy part of the branch that's actually dead, and river red gums actually have this amazing ability to actually collar off or isolate branches. So when times are tough, instead of the whole tree suffering, they'll actually have a sacrificial limb that they just slowly cut off the nutrients and the water to, and by doing this they actually save the rest of the tree. Check it out. What a magnificent tree. So here's a closer look at those collared off branches. You can see there's actually another hollow in here as well. The nickname for these trees is actually widowmakers. They're not a good tree to camp under. It's actually called red gums here nature's guest house because of the large number of species that trees like this can house. It's just this huge variety of homes. When you have a tree like this with such a diverse range of hollows, it's got, you know, bark in some places that things can live under. It's got branches. Because it drops the branches, creates this amazing leaf litter on the ground for all those the decomposers and those little bugs and things that put all the nutrients back into the soil. Creates habitat for them. Lizards, bats, small mammals, all sorts of things live in these trees. They're just absolutely incredible.
This unique plant is actually called caustic bush, and up here on the Giles Track is one of the only known spots in the park that this plant is actually found. So it's a chance to see a unique species and something that you won't see everywhere else in the park. This track here is actually from a member of the Varanus genus, the same family that things like goannas and that come from. This one was more than likely from a parenti. They're really common in the park. That's its tail drag in the middle, and then over to the left hand side and up the top to the right you can actually see its footprints and the track continuing off into the distance. These footprints are so easy to see because of the sand, so you actually get some amazing records of what's been active in the area. Now this reptile is actually a perfect example of how animals adapt and evolve to be able to camouflage in with their environment. So if you have a look at his back, you'll actually notice that there's lateral stripes of red and white. So the majority of him is like red in colour, but he's actually got white or light creamy coloured stripes running the length of his body as well. And you'll notice that what he's standing on is actually a stick, and that these stripes help it to blend in perfectly with that. So the red is the same colour as the rock, and it's got stripes that match the leaf litter and the sticks that they'll be hiding amongst. So you'll notice that this little dude is actually different colourings to the other lizard. So it's got that red and that almost mottled dark colour towards the back of him, and he's basically designed to blend in perfectly with that rocky environment. So you notice he hasn't got those lateral stripes. He's actually got spots, some darker colour spots and some darker colours in the body and the red, and that helps this lizard camouflage in perfectly with that rocky environment that he's living on.
It's sunset in sand country, my favourite time of the day. In sand country and out in this arid environment, when the sun finally starts to go down, it brings a much needed relief and drop in temperature that many of the bush animals need to survive. Often this time of day, dusk, and when the sun goes down, is when many of the bush animals of the desert come out to hunt and come out to play.